presenter, uh, Roxanna Johnston, coming to us straight from the City of Ithaca drinking water plant. So I'm going to share the results from a large, I think considerably for me anyway, project that came out of our drinking water source protection plan. Um, done all the lifts done by Barton and LaJudas for us. They were the um, technical support provider from the state for us. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. I think it's a really cool project, and I think that um, all the municipalities could really get something out of it. I mean, it was done with the lens of protecting the city of Ithaca's drinking water source, 6 Mile Creek, but the recommendations that came out of it would protect all the water resources, if they were applied throughout a municipality. So whether you have public drinking water or not, these would be very helpful recommendations for your municipality. So instead of just talking about it, I should share it. Let's see, here we go. And now I need to okay, I need to figure out how to share it in the right way. Huh.
You can go down to the bottom and do the right beside the slidey bar. Yeah, that. Oh,
that one?
Yeah, slideshow.
Okay, I won't get any notes that way though. But that's okay.
Oh, do you not see your notes?
I do not see my notes.
No.
That's okay. All right, so I already mentioned that what this project came out of. It was a New York State Sea grant that funded this. Um, and the work was performed by Barton and Lachutis. And you guys have heard, and many of you have been involved with, or are still involved with, developing drinking water source protection plans. The state's effort that they've been promoting now for a few years. It's sort of in line with watershed rules and regulations, except that this is a voluntary, cooperative approach, and that it highlights implementation of projects instead of a regulatory approach to look for violations. But the goals are the same, to protect your source water. So in development of the plan, you list all of your issues of concern for your particular source water, and they'll be different, whether you're urban or rural or surface water or groundwater, and then what's in the upper parts of your watershed. And then for all of those concerns, projects are developed that outlines of projects that will help you get started to address the concern. And so one of ours was development in our watershed, because in 6 Mile Creek, honestly, it's not heavily built out, which is terrific. The headwaters, I suppose if like technically they start in Hammond Hills State Forest, there's another little branch that takes off and starts in Yellow Barn State Forest. So they're in good shape. So if the watershed was developed, that would make a big difference. So there's a plan management team that discusses more of the details of how we might move some of these things forward to mitigate any of these possible problems. And a couple things came out of that. One was that the pressure right now on the larger parcels is for large-scale solar projects. And model solar law was developed as a separate effort than this build out analysis, but the results were folded into this and shared out at one time. And then the other thing was to be able to kind of anticipate and plan ahead for where best to site future development, so that it would have the least impact of any sort, but thinking mostly of higher risk things like gas stations, or large parking lots. And out of that came the build out analysis. application. So build-out analyses are usually applied to you're going to create like a new commercial area and you want to see what the impact is on the infrastructure or traffic, that sort of thing. Um, this was applied to if development happened, what would that mean for stormwater pollution to the creek? So it was a different way to look at the impacts. That part was kind of novel for this study. The municipalities that were part of this, that are in the 6 Mile Creek watershed, are Town of Ithaca, Danby, Dryden, and Caroline. Um, the city of Ithaca is not actually in our drinking water watershed. um, so those were the towns that we looked at. Um, and then the goals were to, like I mentioned, understand this relationship between land use types and development and pollutant loading, to focus in on the major transportation corridors where transportation is more likely, um, look at different development scenarios and see how the impacts would change. After looking at that, recommending land use planning tools that would mitigate those impacts, and then sharing that out with the community leaders in each of the municipalities. Um, so the report, oh, I was going to do this, but I started talking when I got on. I was going to put all these links to these reports in the chat. Um, Remind me when I'm done to do that so you can get to these. But what I'm going to focus on is not the literature review or the model build, but if you're interested, Rebecca Menace is the expert on this, and she can point you in the right direction for how the model was built. But I'll show you more about once the model was done, how that was applied. So it was like a $47,000 grant. There's only so much you can do. You can't analyze the whole watershed, so you have to kind of whittle down to where your areas that you're really going to apply this study. So in some sense, this was a pilot study, but again, as I said right at the beginning, the recommendations that came out of it, if applied municipal wide, um, the municipality would benefit and the water quality for all of your water resources would benefit. So we looked at the municipal parcels that were along the two transportation corridors, Route 79 and Coddington Road, that were within the critical source water area. And that on this lower picture is this squiggly purple line along 6 Mile Creek. In general, that's 1,000 feet away from the main stem of the creek. But you'll see all these weird bumps and lumps. And what the stakeholder group who helped with developing this plan suggested were that so much of the erosion sources in 6 Mile Creek, and that's one of the main concerns, actually starts in these tributaries. And so ignoring them or not treating them as individually important would probably be a mistake. The bumps include extra area for each of those main tributaries. And these green circles identify the areas in each municipality that were assessed. Okay, so some of the things that were considered, of course, were land use. This is where I had some notes, but um, there were different things than just, well, I'll just go with land use. Environmental conditions. The main thing on this was steep slopes and how that interacted with the land cover below that. Um, the zoning districts in each of the municipalities, if there is zoning, were considered. And then some of the details and the zoning were also considered. So this is just a very simplified table from one of the municipalities, give you an idea of the details that were looked at, because every town has has a different piece, of protection, or they might have the same type of protection, steep slopes, but it might be worded differently and therefore have a different level of protection or application. And so that kind of nuance was looked at for each town. Um, so for this one, there's two different highest intensities. So the idea was to look at what is the land now, and what would the land look like if it was at its max development based on the current regulations. Um, so there's highest intensity by right, and then if you have to go in and have a site plan review or you have to get a permit, it bumps up. You see in a lot of these, like small mines or small solar might be allowed, where if you get a permit or review, it can be a bigger project, large mines, large solar, some commercial. This one, even some gas stations or junkyards. The size of your subdivisions goes up from less than 5 to 5 units. Um, Minimum lot sizes don't apply everywhere. They Max lot coverage changes by the zoning district, and the size of the structure can change as well. So that's the kind of detail that was reviewed in each municipality. Um, and the other thing that was reviewed were more details in the code. So I already talked about the districts and the land use and subdivisions, but more information on what kinds of things are there for stormwater management, erosion control, site design, and solar energy systems. And these weren't always under one heading in the code. They might be scattered in different places where something relevant to this protection existed. So that was all collected. Okay, so then the thing, based on that information, the model was used to look at um, scenario 2B. I find it's a little confusing, but the picture on the left with the blue arrow going to it is is full development based on what's allowed now in this particular municipality. Whereas if you applied some of the recommendations that I'll get to here in just a few minutes, for conservation measures and focused on that lens of the source water that's going through your municipality, um, you can see you achieve some more protection um, along the waterway that you're not getting right now. So even if you have steep slopes or you have um, some other like restrictions on percent cover within your parcel that can be developed, it's not it's not thinking about or considering where the source water is. So you can achieve more by applying some of these. And here's another municipality, again, full development as the regulations and codes stand now. And if you apply some of the recommendations here, all the extra protection you get for your water resources. Selfishly, again, for me, for the city of Ithaca's drinking water source, but again, um, the municipality benefits by having this water system in good shape for flooding and other things like that. Um, so I talked about a lot of things that went into that model. Another thing that was looked at were municipalities' comprehensive plans and what's in them and whether they were current or not. And recommendations were made for things that could be added to that. So here are some of the recommendations. So the first three items were recommended for every municipality And that's not to say that they don't already have this to a greater or lesser degree. Um, there, but there are specific things that each municipality could gain from increasing or building out on these areas. And then others, a comprehensive plan needs updated or is now undergoing update. That's Danby and Ithaca. Steep slope regulations for Danby and Ithaca um, would be beneficial. Critical source water overlay that was recommended again for all because of course why would Danby, Dryden, Ithaca, and Caroline have specifically thought to have a critical source water overlay district for Six Mile Creek. It didn't have a critical source water area defined until the end of 2022. Um, Also considering maybe having overlays for the unique natural areas, use schedule, and specific impervious surface regulations. For the clustered subdivisions, um, and these, so I should say where it says existing and recommendation, each one of these slides is an example of a recommendation for one of the four municipalities. Um, and I pulled from the four different municipalities, so it's not just picking on one municipality all the way through. So when it says existing, it's that particular municipality has this language. Um, so the recommendation is that environmentally sensitive areas should be defined because without that, it becomes a negotiation with people and it can change depending on who's on your board or who's reviewing the requests. And then to require um, a specific percent of a subdivision area to be preserved in the source water area um, and instead of like no more than 10% to require greater than 10%. A suggestion that would be reasonable in this case. Oh, and the other thing that this talks about for cluster subdivisions is to also talk about weighting them. Well, that's what this defining the environmentally sensitive areas partially gets at is instead of having them just clustered, which all by itself is helpful, but also bearing in mind if keep losing my mouse, if a stream is going through like this upper corner of the development, um, that there might be some changing of the outline of the subdivisions in that area, or incentivizing or requiring some extra like repairing plantings. Again, some just purposeful thought about how that development interacts with the source water. So for stream corridor overlays, there's an example where up to 10% of a parcel's land area can be developed and sometimes up to 25%. And right now it doesn't necessarily say where that is. So again, it doesn't consider necessarily how close that is to the source water area. So in the box up above here, it's kind of complicated, but there's recommendation that a tier-based system for allowable development in the overlay be used instead of um, just going from 10% to 25%, and then some kind of language about when you are closer to the stream, encouraging, incentivizing, or requiring some kind of riparian planting. And what the tier um, suggestion basically gets at is that if your parcel is partially in the critical area and almost all of it is covered, you know, okay, so the more land you have available outside of the critical area, then the less you should be able to develop inside the critical area. So again, just sort of waiting that development approval to be away from the critical area when that's feasible because you have excess property outside of that area. Um, so that's a recommendation. Riparian overlay district um, currently prohibits addition of impervious surfaces within 100 feet. And then if you want to be closer, you have to get approval. So the recommendation is that for intermittent streams is that you actually give intermittent streams the same protection. Um, Also, possibly expanding the prohibition of impervious surfaces, expand on that, and also restrict disturbance of land in these protected areas of 50 or 100 feet, and restrict the clearing of trees would also provide extra protection. And again, the idea to require or incentivize planting within that setback area. As a different towns of existing regulations, storm management, erosion SWIP for state regulated waterways, no riparian overlay district or stream setbacks law. So I recommend that one be established. Um, and another one, stream setback distances are tiered based on the stream drainage area. So how far up you are in the headwaters. So again, just like the applying the same protection for perennial and intermittent streams, this suggests applying the largest setback distance to all of the stream segments if they're within the critical or source water area. And so I mentioned at the beginning that one of the things we did was develop a model solar law, and that was a separate project than the build out, but it fits right in there because it seems like based on input from Tompkins County Soil and Water Conservation District that for large open and agricultural properties, the biggest pressure right now for type of development is large solar systems, and everyone's heard this already before, but you know, green energy is great, but they've been exempted from the stormwater rules. So districts are finding that during construction, they can create a bit of an erosion disaster, and the municipalities don't have the authority that they would over other projects to require them to meet those stormwater regulations. But there are other things that can be done that will achieve better protection and also take some of the burden off of the municipality for um, oversight and for costs from unintended consequences like some infrastructure damage for erosion or private property damage from erosion. Um, so this is just an example of kind of what each municipality has on the books, and you can see how they're different, same, how they can be applied differently. Um, so the model solar law that was developed is planned is expected to be used as like an a la carte menu because again every town has something, um, but they're all a little different, and they all have the things they don't have are all different as well. So one of the main things was that a lot of times where it says, just like on that earlier slide, like be careful of environmentally sensitive areas. Well, clear definitions so that those are not, you know, interpretive or up for negotiation um, is much more helpful. Having maps, requiring legally binding maintenance contracts with detailed components and um, minimum notification requirements on all kinds of phases of the project. notification. One of these is notification of a change of developer or ownership. One of the problems is that they'll change, and that new person, um, through oversight or lack of consideration or whatever, often doesn't really pay attention to the approvals and requirements that the original company achieved, and they just don't happen. Um, Requiring final review of projects before you get the permits, so they have to come back in before they actually start building anything, periodic inspections. Um, Sometimes there are some studies or data or numbers that you can require and then shift that cost to the developer. Have the developer also pay for these inspections again to take some of that burden off of the municipality. And then holding an escrow bond funds, maintenance and decommissioning of the site at an adequate level. Um, I mentioned comprehensive plans. So the recommendation for everyone is just that as they're updated in the future, to consider including the map of the city of Ithaca's source water area and including strategies specifically aimed to protect that. And again, like I said, if a municipality wanted to adopt some of these recommendations, they wouldn't there's no reason really to just focus on a source water area um, for one drinking water source. There'd be benefits applying it to all the water resources in that area. So steep slopes laws, some recommendations for Danby and Dryden because they didn't have steep slopes laws. Um, was of course to develop them. Some construction standards using the state's model law. Critical source water overlay district for everyone. That would limit the density of development, prohibit some kind of high pollution potential uses. I already mentioned the UNA overlay district. This would make it more clear, especially if you included a map um, and for where those sites are for anyone who wants to develop an area, and to include some specific restrictions about impervious surface and soil disturbance limits. Um, so I have notes on these. I just can't remember what they are exactly. But one of the points on these is that if a parcel is smaller, and you don't want to say it's just not feasible really to say, development's not allowed there. Um, you can allow the same percentage, but you could require that of cover, but you could require that the impervious surface has to be less. And so that would encourage green infrastructure or green building. Um, so that would be another way to incentivize that. Conservation districts. This was a specific, so Dryden has a conservation district, which is great. And it has a goal of protecting ecological and open space and assets, and that residential and agriculture are the primary use. However, when you get into the code, some of the permitted uses are sort of contradict the goal, so car washes and repair garages. So the recommendation is that that be revised. Already talked about this. So next steps. Next steps. So the key findings are that opportunities exist to integrate drinking water source protection regulations and or site plan review so that they're really conscious of each other. And as I keep mentioning, protection of anyone's drinking water source area can provide co-benefits for that municipality or residents that live along there. Flood mitigation, reducing nutrient loading, erosion, or impacts to municipal infrastructure or private property. Um, And that is it for Stop the Share. I will also add that the Tompkins County's Water Resources Council has a committee called Drinking Water Protection. And one of the things that we're looking at is possibly trying to help move this along. These results have all been shared to all the municipalities, but everyone knows how that goes, right? Like, so you've shared the information. Like, how do you actually get that adopted? How do you move any of it forward? That requires some kind of some attention from my side, I guess, for the city of Ithaca, and also from the other municipality and what they want to do. So we're looking into that, and just today, Rebecca Menace is attending a stormwater conference down in Ithaca, and was talking to the original grantors and looking at um, like a phase two of this and trying to, through a grant, fund working with a municipality or two who wants to actually implement some of this, help develop specific language for the code. It's all very much in the talking phase just today, but we are excited to try and make this a reality over time and achieve sustained good water quality for our drinking water source into the future. So with that, I will be done. Thanks, and take any questions. Okie dokie. All right. Well,
Roxy, I got a couple
yeah,
if nobody else is going to jump in on this. It's Michelle Henry.
yeah. Hi. Go ahead.
Love that you're again, considering the tribs, as we both know, it's a massive influx to the reservoir. Um, were holistic flood data considered with the model or historical rather? So recent
Um,
major storms and the flashing.
so for some of the calculations, I think the only way that would have been, I think the only part that was considered was in the DWSP2, and that was how far out the tributaries would be considered in the critical area. They used the mean wetted channel data, which
Okay.
isn't focusing on big storm events, but it'd be included in that. But no, that 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 wasn't included.
Okay, I was looking at the maps and I was considering the first and second floodplains, and I noticed that you had a significant floodplain that went back to a cliff that wasn't included in one section, but other spots they were. So I was just trying to understand the logic behind what got included or didn't get included in the buffer.
Oh, and the critical in the purple squiggly line, or in some of the municipality comparisons.
The riparian buffer that you had set up for the riverine overlay zone.
Oh, okay. So that map, two different maps. I believe it's the town of Ithaca has a riparian setback, and the town of Caroline has a water overlay district. So those those maps showed their existing maps of what they have developed for protection.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And just because I'm thinking about it, because I've got it on my brain, um, do you know the timeline that you have before the reservoir fills up
Well, it's
or
shallower than it was.
significantly loses your ability to supply water to the town or the city?
Well, so that incentivizes us to reduce erosion, right? To slow that process down. Yeah, I don't know, but it's never been dredged. The dam was completed in 1912. Um, we have significantly less storage capacity than we did in 1912, a lot less. We still have about a month's worth with no rain. So that's not insignificant. Um, and we do have the ability to get some help from Bolton Point. in case of drought, they can provide us some portion of our daily need, and we would also have to implement conservation measures. And that same sharing arrangement exists for Cornell University, uses Fall Creek, and they don't have a reservoir, but they also have I think a lower demand often. So we have a backup plan, and I guess I would say it's probably a few decades because it's been over 100 years. But it is too shallow. It is shallow enough that it impacts water quality at this point. We didn't know we had a manganese problem until that drought of record in 2016, and I think we would have known that over the last 100 years. Um, if it was a serious problem, like always a problem, I think the reason it's a problem now is because it is shallower in the reservoir. The water heats up, the plants grow a lot, the water goes anoxic. And when the sediments become anoxic, they'll release manganese. And that just wouldn't have happened when the reservoir is deeper. Yeah, so that's become an issue, and it complicates treatment, although we're getting pretty good at it. But dredging the reservoir would be better. Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Any other questions?
I might as well ask about the unique natural area overlay district, which I see as kind of a regulatory nightmare, given that they're constantly updating the maps and changing the boundaries and adding new districts and stuff. And so, you pass your district this year, next year they redraw some of the outlines of some of the unique natural areas. And so you find yourself having to update the district every year. Or...
That's a fair question. I'm going to say I'm not a planner. But no, that's a really good question. You could reference them, but that still leaves you in that position where every year when someone looks, they'll find a different location that's included or no longer included, and that won't make a lot of sense to people. Yeah, that would probably be one of those details we would try to work out, and achieve the same protection or achieve the goal, and avoid that complication if we do decide to pursue this funding for this phase 2. And I say we're looking at maybe working with one of the municipalities that was already in our original project, and then be another municipality outside of it, because we're interested in seeing applying this outside of the 6 Mile Creek watershed, and gaining that increased use. So I don't know if Lansing would be interested. I know you're reviewing
Lansing's
your
doing its
codes.
whole zoning starting this July.
Yeah, so it might be very timely.
Yeah.
And because of the DWSP2 for Bolton Point, so you have a different source water and different considerations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you could achieve a lot of it through some of the other districts you're talking about. You have a riparian area, you've got steep slopes. Once you start building these all up, you're going to cover most of the unique natural areas, if not all of them.
Right. That might not, I suppose that could be true for everyone. Perhaps it'd be true for everyone, but it might not be as effective in every municipality. So something to look at for each municipality to consider. But yeah, that's a good consideration. All right, we'll be in touch.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for listening to Roxy. And you don't have to stay, Roxy, if you don't want to, but we're going to go on with the rest of the agenda. Oh, shoot. I have to stay. Okay. All right.